Kara first noticed the light in the basement window on a rain-drenched Thursday evening. The storm had turned the yard into a swamp, thunder cracking like bones above her as she trudged out with the garbage. Lightning flashed and, for a split second, the basement window glowed, not warm yellow, but a sickly, pulsating blue, like the light beneath skin when veins press against it. She froze. That basement had no power. The landlord said the wiring down there was dead and buried, just like it should be, but the light flickered again, slow and deliberate, as if it were breathing. The air thickened with rot, not just wet earth, but something sharper like copper and old bile. She tasted it on her tongue, metallic and wrong, like biting your lip to hard. A low, wet creak echoed up from beneath the floorboards, followed by a whisper. Not a voice, not words, just want. She dropped the garbage bag. The plastic split open, spilling wet coffee grounds, and sour milk across her sneakers died in the moment the light vanished. The world felt normal again. The storm muted, the wind paused, even the oppressive pressure behind her eyes lightened, just enough to make her doubt what she'd seen. False calm, false hope. She stepped forward, drawn to the glass. On its fogged surface, her reflection blinked twice. She didn't. She stumbled back, breath ragged, and saw something etched faintly into the sill, an old warding sigil, half scratched out. Beneath it, written in Urdu, was a local warning she only half remembered from her grandmother. Cover the eyes of the dead, or they'll never stop looking. The wind screamed through the trees again, and from deep within the house, behind the sealed basement door, something knocked 3 times. The house was never truly quiet, even when the wind outside died. The walls still groaned as if exhaling something ancient. Floorboards shifted in slow, deliberate patterns, never chaotic, always rhythmic, like footsteps that circled without. Getting closer, Kara tried to convince herself it was just the age of the place, but each sound carried weight, the kind that presses on your chest when you sleep. The air inside smelled faintly of mildew and rust, with sudden whiffs of something sharper decay. Maybe, or old meat left in the walls. The basement door was nailed shut with thick, rusted spikes. The landlord had joked once, awkwardly, old superstition. They say if it breathes once, you trap it. If it breathes twice, you bury it. Kara had laughed with him, but now the joke clung to her like damp skin. She'd started hearing whispers at night, soft, indistinct, too quiet to make out, but loud enough that she began leaving her phone recording while she slept. Every morning, nothing, silence. But every night, the whispers grew more precise. Last night, she'd woken up with a nosebleed and a taste like battery acid in her mouth. Her sheets were damp, but not with sweat, something colder, slimmier. When she peeled the blanket back, the stain looked like a handprint pressed in oil. She didn't sleep after that. Couldn't. She found a bundle tucked into the attic crawl space. That morning, charcoal black feathers wrapped in twine and soaked in dried wax. A charm, maybe. A failed one. Her grandmother used to say, never sleep above an unblessed room. The dead climb upward. For a brief moment that afternoon, everything felt still. The whispers stopped. The house quieted. She almost believed it had passed, until the walls began to bleed. The scratching started just after midnight. Kara sat curled on the couch, lights on. TV blaring static from a dead channel she hadn't turned to. Her fingers were trembling. Coffee untouched in her lap. Beneath her, behind the basement wall, something clawed softly. Scrape, pause, scrape again. Not frantic, not animal, measured, patient. She tiptoed to the laundry room, the wall separating her from whatever lurked in the sealed basement. The drywall felt icy, not the clean cold of winter, but something raw, damp, like a morgue drawer. The scent hit her as she leaned in, sharp copper and rotting onions, like old wounds left open too long. Her breath stuttered. From inside, she heard it again. A whisper, not from a mouth but something trying to be a voice. Let me in. Kara reeled backward, bile burning her throat. The wall pulsed faintly, as if something beneath was breathing. She stared for a long minute, waiting for it to stop, for reason to return. And then, just as suddenly as it started, silence. The air cleared. No more scratching, no voice. She almost laughed. Relief rushed in like oxygen. But as she turned to leave, Her heel slid on something slick. The floor beneath her had darkened thin trails of something thick and red trickling from the baseboard cracks. Blood, but only in moonlight. When she flipped the light switch, the stain vanished. Desperate for answers, she clawed through old boxes left by the previous tenant. At the bottom of one, wrapped in decaying velvet, was a child's sketchbook, crude drawings of a blue light. In a window, a figure with no face. Beneath one picture, the man under the house watches when you sleep. Kara snapped the book shut, and from behind her something softly exhaled her name. Kara sat hunched at the back corner of the town library, fingers twitching over a stack of brittle newspaper clippings and mold-stained property records. The librarian, a hunched woman with milky eyes, had warned her not to go digging into that house. Some walls ain't meant to be questioned, she'd whispered. Kara ignored her. She needed answers, needed control, needed something to blame for the walls that bled only in darkness, and the voice that had started mimicking her mother's laugh. She found a yellowed article from 1947. Local doctor disappears, basement sealed. Ellie Brandt, a surgeon turned occultist. Town whispers claimed he tried to resurrect his son using ancient burial rites stolen from a traveling Thacker rituals that dealt not in resurrection, but in exchange. Brandt's journals, confiscated and burned, described the blue gaze, and the third breath, always capitalized. It wasn't life he brought back, it was something older, borrowed from the space between death and memory. Kara's mouth tasted like rust and spoiled milk as she read. Her tongue felt swollen, her gums tender as if the words themselves rotted her from inside. Pages smelled of dry rot and smoke. Every new paragraph crawled deeper beneath her skin. Then the lights in the library flickered. The air grew sharp, charged with static. For one impossible moment, she saw her own reflection in the dusty window, but standing outside, staring in. Same clothes, same face, wrong eyes. She slammed the book shut, heart pounding, only to find the whispers gone. The world seemed normal again, safe, until she stepped outside and noticed the wet footprints on the pavement. Bare, small, leading from the library to her car, and smeared across the windshield. Written in something dark and dripping, "You're reading it wrong." That night, Kara awoke to someone whispering her name, not from outside, not even beside her. The voice slithered up from inside the walls, curling around her ears like smoke. It was soft, childlike, and wet as if spoken through a mouth full of water. Her eyes snapped open to total darkness. Her bedside lamp, always left on, was dead. Her room stank of iron and mildew. The air felt syrup thick and cold, as though the walls had sucked all the warmth out of her bones. "Kara," it sang, long and slow, her chest clenched. The whisper didn't stop. It echoed within her. It knew her name because it had worn it once. She stumbled into the hallway, heart hammering. The basement door stood ajar. The rusted nails, which should have sealed it shut, lay scattered across the floor like discarded teeth. She hadn't touched them. She hadn't. As she stepped closer, the light returned blue and soft, glowing like the heart of a dying flame. It pulsed gently from the crack beneath the door. Her breath caught. Then the whispers fell silent. Just for a moment, the house felt still, peaceful, like whatever had been knocking had finally left. She pressed her ear to the door. Nothing. Then a voice, her own voice, spoke back. "I'm still in here." Kara recoiled, choking on bile. Her lips tingled, tasted like burnt meat. Her hands shook as she grabbed her phone and opened her recording app. But before she could hit record, her screen lit up on its own. Her camera flicked on. The live feed showed her hallway, but she wasn't in the frame. In her place stood a little boy with stitched shut eyes, and as the blue light swelled brighter, the basement door began to open, slowly, silently, invitingly. Kara first noticed the light in the basement window on a rain-drenched Thursday evening. The storm had turned the yard into a swamp, thunder cracking like bones above her as she trudged out with the garbage. Lightning flashed hand. For a split second, the basement window glowed, not warm yellow, but a sickly, pulsating blue, like the light beneath skin when veins press against it. She froze. That basement had no power. The landlord said the wiring down there was dead and buried, just like it should be. But the light flickered again, slow and deliberate. as if it were breathing. The air thickened with rot, not just wet earth, but something sharper like copper and old bile. She tasted it on her tongue, metallic and wrong, like biting your lip. Too hard. A low, wet creak echoed up from beneath the floorboards, followed by a whisper. Not a voice, not words, just what? She dropped the garbage bag. The plastic split open, spilling wet coffee grounds and sour milk across her sneakers. In the moment the light vanished, the world felt normal again. The storm muted, the wind paused. Even the oppressive pressure behind her eyes lightened, just enough to make her doubt what she'd seen. False calm, false hope. She stepped forward, drawn to the glass. On its fogged surface, her reflection blinked twice. She didn't. She stumbled back, breath ragged, and saw something etched faintly into the sill, an old warding sigil, half scratched out. Beneath it, written in Urdu, was a local warning she only half remembered from her grandmother. Cover the eyes of the dead, or they'll never stop looking. The wind screamed through the trees again, and from deep within the house, behind the sealed basement door, something knocked 3 times. The journal told her everything, just not in words. As Kara flipped its damp, curling pages, the ink seemed to ripple beneath her fingertips. At first, she thought it was water damage, but then the letters shifted, rearranged themselves, bleeding. Across the parchment like veins, images pulsed in her mind, unbidden visions not remembered, but implanted. She saw Ellie Brandt in the flicker of her flashlight, gaunt, pale, eyes milky with sleep death, chanting in tongues he hadn't known before the accident. Circles of blood drawn around a child's broken body, a mirror tilted toward the sky. He wasn't trying to revive his son. He was replacing him, making the boy a vessel, a body to house. Something pulled from the space between breath and burial, something that wore the shape of memory, but hungered for reflection. The taste of bile rose in Kara's throat again, bitter and metallic. Her vision blurred at the edges. Her heartbeat slowed, then stuttered. The air in the basement pressed down like deep water. The stone walls began to sweat, beads of dark liquid dripping like tears. They smelled of pennies and stagnant ponds. She dropped the journal. It slapped the floor with a wet thud, and for a brief second, the light behind the wall dimmed. A flicker, hope. Maybe it was weakening. Maybe she had time. But then the entire room breathed. The cold stone exhaled rot. Whispers returned, dozens of voices at once, each repeating one word in 1,000 twisted tones. Look. Kara spun to flee, but the basement door was gone, replaced by a wall of mirror-shined stone. Her reflection stood inside it, mouth smiling, eyes stitched shut, and as the light began to bloom again, her reflection opened its mouth and started to speak. The light exploded outward, not heat, but pressure, like being submerged in glacial water. Kara dropped to her knees. Her skin burned with cold. Her teeth clattered so hard they cracked. The walls trembled, oozing black ichor from old wounds that had never truly healed. Every surface shimmered with that same sick blue glow, as if the house itself had been turned inside out. From the mirror stone wall, something peeled free, a figure tall, impossibly thin, wrapped in shadows that moved wrong. Its head twisted, too far, chin grazing its chest. Its smile stretched beyond skin. Where its eyes should have been were pits of coiling light, not glowing, devouring. It glided toward her without sound, without effort. As it came closer, the air soured. She could taste it, something sharp and coppery on her tongue, like she'd been chewing on a lightning rod soaked in bile. Her ears filled with a low, constant murmur, the same word spoken by hundreds of dead mouths. Closer. Kara screamed. It didn't matter. The thing didn't flinch. But for one precious second, the light dimmed when she turned her head away. It needed to be seen. In the dirt, her trembling fingers found a shard of broken mirror. She held it up, not to look into it, but to trap the thing inside. It paused, twitched, a flicker of hesitation. Hope sparked. Maybe the old rituals weren't all dead. Maybe something her grandmother once said, something about reflections being bindings, was true after all. Then the creature split, splintering like rotten wood. From its spine, tendrils bloomed. Each one wore a different face, some hers, some others. One looked like her mother, grinning ear to ear, mouth stuffed with hair, and behind them all, The blue light surged brighter. The basement began to sing. She didn't remember falling, only the impact, her shoulder cracking against the basement floor. Her breath stolen by the cold, not normal cold. This was hungry cold. It slid into her bones, filled her lungs, and tasted like rusted nails and old blood. The air reeked of burnt teeth and stagnant water. Kara tried to crawl. Her fingernails scraped against stone slick with something that felt like skin. The light had grown into a low blue sun, humming through the concrete, pulsing in time with her heartbeat. Each flash brought visions. Brant sawing open a mirror backed in bone. His son's corpse rising, face mirrored, eyes glassy and wrong. The town priest sealing the basement not with faith, but fear. The protective sigils weren't blessings. They were barriers of desperation. The journal had lied. The light could never be trapped. It wasn't in the house. The house was in it. Her name echoed around her, first a whisper, then a chorus. Each repetition chipped away at her thoughts. She saw her own face melt in and out of the shadows, smiling, whispering, "We're already here." Her memories unraveled like threads soaked in acid. She could no longer remember her mother's voice, couldn't recall the date, couldn't remember if she'd ever lived here before. And then it stopped. The light faded, the whispers silenced. The basement grew still. For the first time in days, she could breathe. Her limbs no longer trembled. She laughed, shaky, half mad. It was over. Somehow, it was over. But then the walls peeled. Strips of drywall curled back like rotting skin, revealing mirrors, hundreds nailed beneath the surface of every wall, in every reflection. Kara stood staring back, but only one of them blinked. It took 3 days before anyone noticed Kara was gone. Her car was still parked outside, dusted with a fine coat of ash. Her lights were on, her keys still in the ignition. The front door was open just a crack, as if she'd stepped out for a moment and never returned. The house breathed silence, thick, pressed into quiet. Even for an empty place, the landlord, already jittery from past tenants' hasty departures, pushed inside. The air smelled of old milk and scorched hair. The floors were sticky underfoot, like dried sap. As he passed the living room, he caught a strange taste in his mouth, like metal scraped over flame. Downstairs, the basement window had been ray-boarded, but not from the outside. Hammered in tight, clean, almost reverent. No one ever found Kara. Police came and left. A few took photos. One refused to enter past the threshold. A local priest muttered something about gin, and when he saw the sigils hidden under the paint near the basement, he spat and walked out without a word. And still, at night, the neighbors say they see it, that light, faint at first, barely more than a shimmer, then stronger. Always that cold blue, always behind the glass, like someone trapped in the earth, screaming without sound. Sometimes children gather at the edge of the yard, daring each other to look. One girl claimed she saw her dead sister's face in the basement window, smiling, with teeth she never had in life. They say if you stare too long, you'll see yourself. Not the one in the mirror, but the version that stayed behind, watching. And late one night, a teenager leaned in too close. The light blinked, and this time, something blinked back.